see, we've got, I'm gonna start with our bios, starting at the end there with Erin Tuttle. I've got your bio. Erin Tuttle serves as a consultant to the Office of the Attorney General, working with legislative and policy staff, elected officials, and external stakeholders to further the priorities of the Attorney General. Before joining the office, she worked as a senior policy analyst, conducting research and drafting legislation for a variety of clients. Erin is the co-author of Deconstructing the Administrative State and a faculty scholar at the Catholic University of America. Thank you for joining us, Erin. Next we have Betsy Wiley. Betsy serves as the president and CEO of the Institute for Quality Education, a nonprofit organization focused on K-12 education policy, advocacy, and engagement. She also serves as president of Hoosiers for Quality Education, which is an affiliated organization that engages in political activity throughout Indiana in support of candidates and policies that provide educational freedom for Hoosier families. Prior to joining the QE team in January of 2013, Betsy served as Governor Mitch Daniels' Deputy Chief of Staff for 6.5 years and as the Director of Cabinet and Agency Affairs for the first 18 months of the Daniels administration. Her responsibilities included managing the policy team and legislative team, as well as the daily office operations and staff. Before working in the governor's office, Betsy served as Chief Deputy Treasurer for the state of Indiana from February 1999 to January 2004. And in various capacities at the Health and Hospital Corporation of Marion County. She has served on several community and governmental boards, including one near and dear to my heart, the Richard G. Lugar Excellence in Public Service Series, where she has served since 2007, having been part of the class of 1996 to 1997, and as president of the board from 2013 to 2018. Betsy obtained her MBA from Butler University and her bachelor's degree from Miami University.
There was a shorter version. So.
I didn't get that, so thanks so much for being here, Betsy. Allison Slatter. Allison received her bachelor's degree in speech and hearing sciences from Indiana University before beginning a near decade-long career on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. She left the Hill to educate and raise her children, including 2 children with dyslexia. Allison has served on the Indiana Association of Home Educators Government Affairs team since 2013 and is trained in the Orton-Gillingham Reading Intervention Program. And I believe it drove the longest distance to get here from Greenwood. Thanks for being here, Allison. Thank you. And last we have Julie McGuire. Julie is our Republican candidate running for election to the Indiana House of Representatives to represent District 93. Which is the Perry Township area, is that right?
Yeah,
She serves on the board of directors at Roncalli High School and is the former president of the Northwest Perry Neighborhood Association. Julie was born and raised in Indianapolis, is married to Mark McGuire, and has 4 children. She's an active member of the St. Roch Church. Julie is pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and supports parents' rights to choose which school is best for their kids. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and ask a few questions and allow our panelists to respond, and then we'll open it up for a few questions towards the end. So the first question that I have for each of you to just share your thoughts and respond to is, why do you believe school choice is important for families? Sort of a softball there, but. Erin, do you want to begin?
Sure. Well, I think school choice is important for many reasons. The first being that no one really knows the best interest or cares more for a child than their parent. There's nobody that's going to have their best interest at heart more so than a parent. And there are lots of different things that kids need. And there's not a one-size-fits-all school plan for every single child. I mean, I have 2 children, and they are completely different. There's no 2 children more, your children are more identical to each other than they are to anybody else, right? And even with all those, similarities, they have 2 totally different learning styles and 2 completely different needs. So for me, I think the importance of school choice is to enable parents to provide the best opportunities for their unique children.
Thank you, Betsy.
I mean, I completely agree with what Erin said. I think that's the core of why people are about parent choice and school choice and education freedom. It's a lot different than when I went to school, and my parents are both retired, long retired, school teachers, but there weren't a whole lot of options. You either went to public school or you had the resources to maybe attend a private school if there was one close by. So many different learning models now, here being one of them. You guys used to be in Hendricks County, right?
We were Brownsburg.
Yeah, okay, so I spoke over there and I was like, I've been there, but it wasn't here. So anyway, but all different kinds of learning models, more and more popping up every single day. Greater demand out of COVID than ever before for parents to choose for a customized look when it comes to their child's education. You know, a positive, if there are many that came out of COVID, I think is that parents got more engaged in their kids' education. They had to. They were right under, you know, in many cases, they were right there. And so they saw things they liked and things they didn't, things they wanted for their child and things their child was getting or not getting. And now from a market perspective, they're demanding them. And what's gonna be interesting is, and you brought up sort of trying to continue to revive the
Cadaver.
corpse, right?
I use the word cadaver.
Okay, continue to revive the cadaver. You know, I think you're gonna see more and more attempts to try and create a new model. And so, but as Erin said, you know, parents know best for their kids, and it's important that they learn in an environment where they fit in and feel good about learning every day. And so, for those reasons, I'm a choice supporter.
I actually see school choice as two different things. There's one that's the idea where parents are they're the ones that are given the authority as well as the responsibility to educate their children. That's who was supposed to do it. And you go back millennia. That's who educates children, are parents. And so for me, I believe definitely in the idea of school choice as a way to live life. But then there's also this movement that's happening that is school choice, usually bringing in government dollars into other educational areas. And I think that there is, where homeschooling and where school choice movement is, may not quite be eye to eye. We are specifically trying to stay away from government funding. We don't want it. And the reason, because many of us, like she said, 2 of my 3 children are dyslexic. They need a different system than the school could provide. And because I didn't have the government breathing down my neck because I was taking money, I was able to do exactly what I needed to do for my children, regardless of what the school thought or did not think. I mean, I even have a family who, she's a professor of literacy, trying to tell me how to teach my kid. And it was wrong. What she taught me to do, what she tried to get me to do, did not work for my child. I had to do something different. So really what that boils down to is I, as my child's mother, am the expert on my child. And I can use some expert opinion, but at times I have to strike my own course. And the ability to do that is paramount. And that means I can't take government dollars. So parent choice means God gave children to parents, not to the state, not to teachers, not to school boards.
So I have 4 children, and of my 4 kids, we've been in charter schools, private schools, and public schools. So I come from a perspective, I've had a little bit of all, because all my kids had different needs. So it served us well. I was happy to have the opportunity to do that. I know lots of families can't financially. So before I was working at the state senate as a policy analyst, I was at St. Roch for 15 years, and I did tuition, financial aid, SGOs, vouchers. I helped the families walk that path. It's complicated for families to do that. So I would reach out personally and try to help them, you know, get into St. Roch, get their needs covered. But I also saw it coming and going. I would see, you know, people start at St. Roch, and maybe by middle school, their kids need a bigger environment, not 30 kids in a class. They need a bigger school environment, so they maybe went to the public middle school. So I just really appreciate the ability for parents to choose, you know, how it fits. My son was at a charter school for 2 years, and now he's at Roncalli for a private high school. You know, so we just have kind of navigated what's going to work for our family. So.
Well, thanks for sharing your perspectives on that. Why don't we start with Betsy for the next one, and then we can continue to share your opinions. What is the most important thing to know about K through 12 education today, in your opinion?
Lord.
That's a pretty broad question.
Yeah, one, Indiana, I'd say a couple different things. It's broken across the board, right? So one of the things I find striking, and I will take homeschool out of that because and I will say, I think Indiana's, you may correct this, but a pretty good environment for homeschool. There are a lot of people that fight really, really hard to make sure that homeschooling is protected and that the government does stay out of it. And there are always attempts to try and sneak in there, and they are defeated. But you know what I'm talking about?
I
do. But so far so good on that. But when you look at proficiency, right? When you look at whether or not our students are graduating high school with the skills to get the jobs that we see announcements every single day about jobs coming to Indiana, but we don't have people filling them. You hear from employers they don't have the skills that we need. When you see that, both math and reading proficiency is under 40%, right? So 4 out of 10 kids in the state are learning what they need to learn. That's just not okay. You take schools, I went to Carmel High School many years ago. And, but a lot of people at that time said, oh, that's like, one of the greatest public school districts in the state. It's like 60%, right? So that still means 4 out of their 10 are not graduating at a proficient level. And proficiency, by the way, is just, are you learning kind of the basic standards that you need to learn? It is not, are you gonna be the next brain surgeon, head of NASA, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, the one thing people need to know is even our best in any sector isn't good enough. And there's, a huge room for improvement, and it's a crisis.
Does anyone else wanna comment on that?
I will. So yes, what brought me into becoming a reading tutor was actually the data. I was working on education policy for however many years, and all the data that kept coming in, and then of course working with my own dyslexic students and seeing kids just like my kid flailing and being unable to get the help that they needed. Additionally, when I did figure out what was going on with my kids, I thought, well, maybe I need to access some school resources, and I found out schools don't have any. So even if I went to the schools, I was still out of luck. And that's when I figured out, you know what, it's all on me. I'm gonna have to figure it out. Praise God, He prepared me ahead of time before I knew I needed it. Remember my speech and hearing to science degree? Yeah, this is where it came in. I didn't use it for years until then. But it was genuinely from being in public policy that I recognized the need, and I got to the point where I couldn't sit there and have the knowledge that I had and do nothing. And what's sad is actually some of the kids that I work with are teenagers. I work with teenagers. I love working with teenagers, don't get me wrong, it's super fun, I love it. But the fact that they have been so badly failed, I find alarming and problematic. And I say this also as the wife of a public school teacher. So my husband works in a public school, he's also worked in charter schools. I'm not saying this from a place of ignorance or not knowing what's happening. I mean, at one point in time, half of my husband's class was up for adoption, eligible for adoption. So I've seen what happens when kids get lost. I've seen what happens when an otherwise bright child can't read and it learns to believe that they're stupid. They become, particularly boys, become violent. And that's all to distract the teacher from the fact that they can't read. So the reason I have a rather bifurcated bio these days is because my first career was as a public policy person, but through public policy I recognized a need that had to be filled, and I had the skills to do it. So I would say K through 12 is in a very sorry state, and I actually think that parents are in the best position to be able to make the changes that they need to see in the home. And what hurts me more than anything else is to hear these parents say, I can't do it. They've listened to the lie that they are not good enough to teach their children. I'm sorry, but if you were given children, then you were given the ability to teach them.
Thank you. Aaron or Julie, did you want to add?
forget what the question was.
We were talking about the most
K-12.
important things in K through 12 education today.
Yeah, it's very broad. I would say the biggest problem is the lack of focus on academics. If you look at what the time is spent on from morning till afternoon, you will see very little time is spent on math and English. And I know there's a lot of other really neat subjects to learn, but how do you grow and how do you really experience those if you can't read, spell, write, all of those things? So I'm always for the back to the fundamentals, at least for K through 8. I think that if they did that, I mean, there's social emotional learning, all these other things that they try and cram into the day. But if you are a child who's hurting, knowing how to read and write is gonna help you more than any social emotional learning, thing that they throw in throughout the day. So I would say the biggest problem is the lack of focus on academics.
Kind of piggybacking on that, so my youngest son, he's Ukrainian, so when we adopted him, he was 11 years old when he came home. So we started the public schools for English ESL program, which was really good. It's down Perry Township. And then for middle school, I had him go to Paramount Charter School downtown East Washington Street. They're A-level charter school, and they spend their whole day. I think he had, being a charter school, they had flexibility. I think he had 3 math classes a day and 3 ELA classes a day. So they would kind of throw in some social studies with an ELA, and one would be a reading, working on reading and literature, the other one would be working on grammar, So he has done so well, even though for him it's frustrating, but it's kind of going back to the whole, we need to focus. And so they're an A-ranked charter school because they drill down, and it's an IPS charter school. So as a policy analyst at the state senate, when I was looking at the iLearn scores that came out last year, there are some IPS schools with 3% passing iLearn on ELA or math, 3%. And so the families that can choose a charter school, Paramount again, I don't like any school. Every school has their things, right? But I did appreciate for him being a language learner, it was great because now he's gone into Roncalli. He is in some supportive classes and they're meeting those needs, but it's been great because I really feel like he was prepared to be there. So, yeah, just the whole.
And I would also say that I think the ability to read is actually probably the next civil rights issue. Because predominantly those who are unable to read and unable to get the resources that they need to be able to improve their reading scores are predominantly minority groups. And the rest of us figure out ways. I mean, in the homeschool world, look, I'm terrible at math. I will freely admit it. I'm terrible at math. But you know what? I found a mama who's terrible at teaching her kid how to read. So,
Your besties.
so I said, hey, I got an idea. She's like, I think I got an idea for you too. So we swapped kids, and that's how we do it. And here's the best thing, I don't have to pay taxes on it because we swapped services, we bartered. So in the homeschool community, we are able to do things that the public school can't do. We are able to make things affordable in ways that public school parents can't. And a lot of it's because we don't have to follow all the guidelines. Like, I'm not subject to the IDEA laws. I'm not subject to a lot of the special ed laws. I can just do what I think needs to be done.
Well, thanks for sharing. Well, the next question, we're going to go ahead and start with Julie. What barriers in state law do you see that impede school choice?
Okay, so like I mentioned before, I did it on the ground. I did financial aid, I did the SGOs, and I worked with families. We had about 180 families at St. Rock during the time I was there. So I spent lots of time trying to identify families, get them included, find out someone's unemployed, and then me just approaching them. So definitely a barrier is the income guidelines. I know they've gone up. So I was thinking about this today. A family of 4, I believe it's $145,000 for a voucher. Well, you still have to have a pathway in. The pathways are cumbersome, the pathways are difficult to navigate. And I'm sure Betsy can tell all those pathways. I know most of them, but you have a family at, I would have families call me. I had a guy call me, his kids were on a voucher at St. Rock, and he worked for the post office, and he was getting a promotion. And he was like, okay, Julie, do we know what the new income guideline is gonna be next year? He's like, cause I gotta figure out if I can take this promotion or not. I had moms call me, be like, well, I kind of want to go work at, this part-time job, so I'm like, okay, well, how much you gonna make? Like, I would help walk them through that. She would not take the part-time job because they lose a voucher. So you're a family making $145,000, and people think that sounds like a lot of money, but when you have a house payment, a car payment, you have a child at St. Rock, for example, $5,600, Roncalli, $10,000. So you got $15,600 just in tuition. Break that up into 10 payments, you're at $1,500 a month. Okay, that's more than most people's mortgages, for us at St. Rock. And then say you make $148,000. Well, guess what? Now you have nothing. It's like an all or nothing. It's just drop off, and it's just not right. I don't know. We need universal voucher. So that's a problem for me, and a problem working with the families.
I think if you look at choice in the broadest sense, right, where you could go anywhere, and Indiana is blessed to have a wide gamut of educational options available to families, from homeschooling and hopefully, there's no whip, but we're gonna knock on whenever we can, staying out of their business, to ESAs, which are now coming out for special needs students, which work for some, to tax credits and vouchers, to charter schools, which are public schools, to district transfer, right? Living in one school district, living in Carmel and going to Zionsville, living in Pike and going to Washington Township schools, right? All of those are available. When you listen to people, other barriers in addition to what Julie was talking about, transportation. Maybe you live here in Pike, but you want to go to Washington Township. You can do that, but you got to figure out how to take your kid there and pick them up. If you have a job, start of the school day and the end of the school day may not fit exactly in with your job, or multiple jobs, right? So transportation continues to be a big one. School schedule, some people, I hear, like balanced calendars. A lot of people don't like a balanced calendar. Class size, curriculum. I could probably go on, but those are some of the other, in addition to just sort of income qualifications for a voucher, there's some other things that there are people that want to go to other options available to them but can't make it work.
I mean, the only thing I would add to that, maybe it comes at it from a different angle, is when you are pushing forward with, say, universal voucher legislation or expanding income or whatever it is, I think that we also need to remember that we have a responsibility to do it in a way that is clean. Because, there are a lot of, like Indiana, there are a lot of onerous regulations put on the schools who are involved in school choice. And so as you move forward and you want to expand that, you have to remember as you're doing it, we need to make sure we do it cleanly and we're not adding burdens and adding regulations onto the schools. I know that the data reporting requirements for voucher eligible schools has gone really high and it's become really burdensome, and that's not any lawmakers doing, right? This is just through rulemaking at IDOE, because I think we can all agree that school choice is not a priority for the Department of Education. They want to keep all those dollars, and so they want to make it as difficult as possible on the school and on the parent, just like you're saying. So I think moving forward, I think we need to be very cognizant of what might seem like a good trade-off to get a bill through. It may not be, and we need to be really careful of that and try and clean up the rules as well.
So I'll take a slightly different tack. So I would say the greatest barrier to families choosing homeschool is the fact that usually one parent has to give up a salary. For our family, that's exactly what happened. We live on one teacher's salary, that's not, we're not living large, put it that way. So this is usually one of the biggest factors that are involved with families choosing to homeschool or not. I would also say probably even bigger than the affordability issue is the mindset. They have been told that they can't. They have been told that they are not the experts. They have been told that they're not sufficient.
Yeah.
They're not sufficient. But I find it ironic because this is coming from the exact same school system that educated them. So the school system that educated you are telling you that you're too dumb to educate your own child. Okay. I mean, it's like, you gotta wait. I mean, it's like a figure eight. It's like, wait a minute, aren't we back at the same point? So I would say that's really probably the two biggest problems that people have when it comes to homeschooling. There's also this idea that homeschooling is somehow expensive. It's not expensive. Like I said, the issue is the cost of losing the income. Although today, with so many more people working online, it's becoming less and less of an issue, which is great, and I'm all for that. But we're still back to all of that. We still have to figure out how we can help these parents understand and encourage them that they can do this, that this is their, they can do it. There's no impediment to doing it. But of course, we do encourage people to give their kids an equal or equivalent education to that as they would receive in the public schools. Personally, that's not good enough for me. I want my kids to have a better education than what they would get in the public school. And thus far, I think I've provided it, but fingers crossed, I haven't graduated one yet. But I think, and the other problem with the income issue is that these vouchers are not gonna, or these, the ESAs aren't gonna solve that problem. Because curricula is usually one of the least expensive aspects of homeschooling. A math book is a math book. It doesn't matter if it's 5 years old. It's math, hasn't changed. History, actually, these days, you kind of might want an older history book. Just putting that out there.
Just go to 1990.
I'm just saying. So the point is that, you know, we are very resourceful as a community, and we also do a lot of, you know, actually I think I'm still missing one of my all about spelling books that I loaned to another family, but that's okay. But we do a lot of borrowing, we do a lot of helping each other out. We have entire Facebook marketplaces of selling used curriculum. It does not have to be expensive. And so I think that's also one of the biggest misconceptions, that you have to take government money to be able to afford homeschooling, because you really don't. There's even free curriculum out there. That's it. I mean, you really don't, it doesn't have to cost a lot. So the barriers that they have aren't really barriers after all.
Thank you. What do you expect, or what would you like to see from the upcoming 2023 legislative session?
Leave us alone.
I got a laundry list.
Leave us alone.
That's always on it.
Leave us alone.
Go ahead, Betsy, you want to share a few more of those
Well,
on your list?
leave homeschool alone is always on there. We often phrase it as to protect existing models, particularly that of homeschool. So that's always on there, but many of the things that folks here have talked about, right? An expansion of the state's tax credit program and voucher programs for those who want to use that for financial aid, to include all families in the state, right? Get rid of the income limit. Everybody's a taxpayer. If you're paying taxes in, why shouldn't you be able to access some of those tax dollars to educate your child? So we'd love to see that happen. We'd love to see the pathways go away. They're just another sort of administrative hurdle and complication that causes parents and schools to sort of say, this is almost too tough to navigate. I'm out, you know, I'm just gonna do the easy thing and stay in my public school. Picking schools for kids, guys, it's, you know, it's not like going and buying a new pair of jeans, right? I mean,
That's hard enough.
yeah, that's terrible to do. One of my least favorite things. But, you know,
Right.
people seem to think like, oh, well, if they just know about this, then they'll just make this choice. And Sarah Milligan, who works with me, is here, but she spends a ton of her time doing this. It's a process, right? And you really just want to help families say, here are all the options available to you. What questions do you have? Where can you go get information? And until they get comfortable, they're not moving their child, right? I mean, you're just not. And so I think that's another thing we all have to keep in mind. I want to get more equitable funding for our students. Our students are funded very differently. The same child, depending on where they go to school, gets very different amount of money in terms of state dollars and your local property taxes to invest in their education. Same kid, right? Didn't grow extra income, didn't grow more, you know, parents, didn't grow, you know, stronger support system around them, any of that. But if they walk into this door, they get this amount of money. They walk into this door, they get $3,000 less. They walk into that door, they get $5,000 less, right? That's not okay. And so those are a couple of my top ones. I also want to be So we talked about academics. This is another big one of mine. The department is working on a dashboard. I've seen it. It's very academia friendly and it is not very human being friendly. Not that academics can't be human beings, but it's not, if you were a parent trying to go find something out, it's not very intuitive, it's not very easy to navigate. It's got a lot of education jargon on it and a lot of things like that. I think we need to be very transparent about how are we doing academically with all of our students and all of our types of schools so that parents can understand. Maybe a school knocks it out of the park with an English language learner. And so that might be the right choice for you for one of your children, but another school has an amazing music program and that's what gets your child out of bed every day to wanna go learn is the ability to access that music program. When we hide the data and then tell everybody that they're doing great, and then they graduate and they can't read and they can't do math and then they can't get the job that they thought that they could do, shame on us, right? And the data is out there, we're just hiding it and telling everybody they are doing great because we want everybody to feel good, right? And the fact that you're dealing with high schoolers who can't read is because we wanted them to feel good. They don't feel good.
It's a little more than that, but.
Well, and you're got reading specialties, but
That's a totally different
you
subject.
run a lot of people get just kind of moved along, right? Like you're done with third grade, so we're just moving you to fourth grade.
Yeah.
And it's not okay.
Well,
We're doing them a disservice.
The minute they go into middle school, they just stop helping them. Like all they do is just help them and try to cope. And I think that's one of the big differences in homeschooling versus public schooling, is that in homeschooling, we're genuinely looking at the student, what does the student need, and we're making sure that happens, that something happens that is good for them. We actually have a really short feedback loop. So we try to assess our kid, we figure out what's going on with the kid, we figure out, okay, what resources are out there that could meet the needs of this kid. We go and we find the resource, we test the resource on our kid, we decide whether or not if it's doing what we want it to do. If it's not, we ditch it, we get something else. We start all over again. Schools can't do that. Schools are said, here's your curriculum, teach. They don't have the liberty that we have, which is why we don't want the government money. Because we have that short feedback loop, and that is why our kids do well. And in the public school system, they're, up until, I think it was only like 2 years ago, did they actually start testing K through 2 for dyslexia or any kind of reading problems. So we now have, and the reason why I'm having high schoolers and I have middle schoolers and is because nobody helped them for years and they missed out on the screenings. So no one's ever going to help them. And so, and that's just the sad reality of what we're seeing.
And there's plenty of money available to do that. You know, I always point people to this, it's on the Office of Management and Budget's website, it's called Dollars to the Classroom. If you haven't been on there, do it, it's a ride. I mean, you can get your district, you can pull up your school, and it will show you how many dollars actually go to the classroom, and they've got everything in that category now. I mean, it includes therapists, you know, speech people, attendance taking, part of your administrative, you know, all of that is considered in this grouping as dollars to the classroom, meaning it supports the interaction between a student and teacher that goes towards learning. Okay, so they've got everything in there, and I'm gonna say it was maybe 56% of every dollar. So, and it varies a little bit from, you know, there's a state average, district average, and then you'll have your school average. But if you have it in you to do it, and you drill down even further through their links, you can get to like each function within each section that they, you know, tabulate, and you will be shocked to see how much money is absolutely wasted, 100%. These parents who always vote yes in the referendums to increase spending, I tell you, it is not a good idea. Because when they build more, that, you know, the part that is for interest and overhead and all of that, that goes up. And when that goes up, the school resources for the classroom go down. Everything is an option. Everything is a choice of one thing or the other. Just like there's only so many minutes in the day that you have to apportion for what you want your students to learn. Even if something's a great idea, there's not time in the day for it if you're gonna be focused on your fundamentals. And the same goes for the dollars. They gotta be spent properly.
In contrast, we spent about $2,000 for the entire year for all 3 kids. That's it. And 100% of it goes to my kids.
I mean, I feel like older people are much better educated. You very rarely see somebody over, I'm gonna say 50, I'm gonna say over 50, that cannot get changed properly, or cannot read directions, or cannot communicate in a somewhat, intelligent way with people.
Yeah.
They can write, they can read, and I will tell you, they didn't spend that much money on them, and they didn't have all the bells and whistles that everybody thinks they need. 45? Okay.
If I could wave my magic wand, I'd say there'd be a whole bunch of deregulation and the elimination of collective bargaining, right? And so don't underestimate the power of the teachers union and the ability to maintain the Goliath that is a traditional public school system, right? And it's not about the kids that they serve, it is about the adults. It's called the State Teachers Association, not State Student Association. So they are representing their members who are adults, not students. And so, kudos to them for representing their members, but I think we're more into it for the kids. And then it's dereg. And I will tell you, we fight trying to have fewer regulations on schools every single year. And you have all these lawmakers, Julie, do not become one of these, right? But you've seen this firsthand, and you all have, because you all have done this policy stuff.
Yeah.
They say, absolutely, we want to eliminate some regulations. And so, you pick a handful, like literally a handful. But we can't do that one because that's Betsy's law from, 1875, when something happened to Betsy, and that whole process doesn't exist anymore, but we have to keep that on there. Or we eliminate it, but then we pass 10 more. So we eliminate one, but we pass 10 others over here and end up with a net gain. And it is just getting in the way, where if you could simplify education to probably how it was when everybody in this room was in there and teachers got to teach instead of do the gazillion other things that they get to do during their day, and they got to connect with each and every student in the best way for that child, I think you'd see a major turnaround, but I don't see that happening because I don't have a magic wand.
I tell teachers all the time, you should be jealous of me, because I get to do every single day what you went to college thinking you weren't gonna get to do, and you get to do none of it.
Well, here's the thing, is that there's no reason that we have to give up one little thing at the State House. I mean, we have a supermajority, we have a Republican governor. We don't have to barter with anybody if we don't want to. And I know Julie won't, because she worked with me on some stuff
Yeah.
when she was on policy, and I know that she understands that, but I tell you.
It's frustrating to see them, why are you caving? We have the votes, why are you caving on this stuff?
Do you think JD Ford's gonna cave on anything? God, I think he was like a superstar of the last session, to be perfectly honest. They got so much of what they wanted, and it was like, are you just kidding? You don't even have to let him speak if you don't want to.
Yeah.
And they did, and they got a lot.
Well, thank you for sharing all the information that you have. We have about 5 minutes left, and I really wanted to open it up and see if there were any questions from the floor. Go ahead.
Well, I'm back here ready to come out with some questions here. First of all, I agree with what you're saying about government intervention in schools. An example, Hillsdale College. They don't take any government funds, and they do fantastic. One thing I haven't heard you mention, and I think is a big thing in the classroom today, from what I hear, I'm not in education, I'm not a teacher, discipline. I haven't heard anybody mention anything about discipline.
Yeah.
That's a big thing, that's a big preventer.
I was just at a door, so I'm out knocking on doors, I was just at a door last week, I think it was last Thursday. And the guy came outside, he sat on the stoop, he was ready for some questions, But he was telling me, this goes exactly to that, his daughter, was teaching last spring, at an IPS school. And she was just like teaching, he was, I can't remember if it's 3rd or 4th grade, so you're looking at 9, 10-year-old kids, maybe even 8, 9, I don't know. And she she planned to go teach in public schools. That's where she wanted to serve, was to serve underprivileged kids. But she's like, the kids were cussing me out, cussed out the teacher. They would just come and go out the classroom all day long. And if you can't, there's no point sending the kid down to the principal or to the dean because they just come right back. So she's like, I'm not doing this. And now, this past summer, she just started at Nativity Catholic School. She's like, I'm not Catholic. Her dad was like, she's not Catholic, but she wants an environment where she can discipline the kids. And and my son who's in public school, he's like, we had a sub today, and it was just, the classroom was chaos if there's a sub.
You can
And
find
he
a
would
lot of
freak
data
out.
on this,
Yeah.
cause everybody's into teacher, growing the teacher pipeline and retention, right, of teachers, and so Ed Choice, which is used to be the Milton and Rose Freeman Foundation, headquartered here, in Indianapolis, has done some research with teachers saying, you know, what do you need, right, what do you want? It's not more money. More money's in the, you know, top three, but if you ask anybody, would you like to get paid more, I think we all would probably say, sure. But it is discipline, right? It is, I can't control my classroom, is the number one kind of response now.
Well, it goes back also to parents, and you all mentioned parents with an S.
Yeah.
You're lucky if they have parents,
Well,
Good
you're lucky
point.
if they have one,
Yeah.
and are they getting discipline at home?
so my husband actually is a special ed teacher, and the kids that he works with are the very kids who can't be in the classroom setting. They're integrated, so his job is to, when they start, excuse me, I hope my kids have their tablets turned off. Sorry. But that's what his job is to help those kids when they're getting too overstimulated, coming out of the room, calming them down. Prior to that, he worked with the kids out of, if you're aware of Daymar Charter Academy, he worked there, which, you know, how was your day, honey? Well, I didn't get stabbed with a pencil today. Good job. Yeah, so there is that problem. But I will say one of the things that's kind of an issue is that the teachers who are paid to work with kids who are developmentally disabled, who wouldn't hurt a fly, are paid the same, if not more, than the ones who are working with the kids who will pull a gun on you in no time flat. And so that's one of the things that we, as a family, have had to have that conversation about, is this the kind of job that we want him to be in? Because he's working with the rough students, and he enjoys it, he loves it, and he's brilliant with them. I mean, did I mention my husband's a saint? Just out there. But he is a saint, but at the same time, there's a very real cost. Because what happens if he gets very, very injured and he can't go back into that classroom anymore? That's ultimately gonna cost us a whole lot of money. Whereas the teacher who's just having to fill out a lot of paperwork doesn't have that risk.
Alan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I should know more about this, but there's been a couple circumstances in my life that led me to this question. My mom just started as a principal of a charter school for the first time this year, and I volunteer as a CASA and work with two sisters in foster care, and I've been on their case. They've been in the system for over 2 years now, and kind of the worlds collided because what my mom is seeing now is her school's in a high poverty area, and you know, they have a fantastic program, but by the time a lot of those kids get to her, it's because they've been expelled or kicked out of the public school. And of course, the girls that I work with don't have parents that advocate for where they should be, and the older one in particular, a typical school is not for her. She's super smart, but you know, I'm the only one on her case that has even talked about educational options and where she could go and how there's resources for transportation for her and all these other things. She doesn't even have an educational liaison on her case, which she's supposed to, but she doesn't. And so how can we help those kids that don't have parents that are advocating for them still be able to take advantage of these options?
I have one idea on that, because I spoke with a child psychologist about, it was really about the SEL stuff, right? And so a lot of resources are being spent on getting every child in SEL, you know, social emotional learning, getting them learning in social emotional things, okay? So the problem with that is that you can't one teacher with a classroom of students is not going to be able to modify behavior. You can model good behavior, teachers are examples, they've always been that way. But, like, even if you're a trained psychologist and some kid sees you 3 days a week for an hour to work on some behavior, you have maybe a 50-50 chance of really changing a behavior, right? So to put that on teachers is too much. That's too much to expect from them. And what it does is, what the suggestion made to me is why don't they take all of that money and focus it on the foster kids and focus it on those children, because that's where the real need is.
Yeah.
It is not every single student, as much as they claim it, not every single student comes from a home of trauma, okay? And what they're doing, even if they were a class full of trauma-filled students, what they're doing with social emotional learning isn't gonna do jack for it. So instead of wasting the money, lead by example, have rules, don't follow disparate impacts. So the reason a lot of really naughty children don't get told to leave is because they don't wanna have a disparate impact. They will get sort of penalized if they have more black children than white children who were reported for suspension. They have consequences for that, right? So what they do is they just say, we don't send them to the office so it won't be reported. And what happens is it's a Lord of the Flies mentality and the teacher's hiding under her desk. So anyway, I'm kind of getting long-winded here, but I think for children like that, it has to be a focus of resources. She said she doesn't even have an education liaison. That's absolutely ridiculous. There's plenty of money to people providing these services for these children, but they dilute it all over the place where it doesn't have any effect at all.
Marcia?
I guess it's just, my main question, there's so many things you all have brought up, so many things, and, so many issues. Where do we begin to fix it? There's a lot of people out there running for, I have a lot of my own personal friends running for school boards, thinking that is where we need to go to fix it, because I know, you, Erin, mentioned several things about DOEA and the unions and things like that. I mean, is that the best thing we can do to try to get to places that can actually fix some of these things? Obviously, the state legislature, but like Julie and others have pointed out, we have the super majority. Those things shouldn't be happening. But is that the main thing we need to be looking at? Or if not, what are your suggestions? How do we fix?
I mean, school boards are, so in the Parent Bill of Rights that our office put out, we really make a point of it. I mean, there's home rule, and school corporations, your school, district, they have a lot of, the boards have control over them. They are to report to them. If a board is organized and well-informed, they can change all kinds of policies. They can throw out the CRT, they can throw out the DEI, they can bring back fundamental, academics. They can do anything. It's called home rule. But the problem is that the people who are ruling the home are generally there not for the right reasons. I think sometimes, I mean, don't you find they're sort of like kind of maneuvering through it to maybe go to another political position or to take advantage of some other,
Or it's a thankless job, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Terrible.
You don't make any money doing it, although I did get an email today about, apparently in Richmond schools, you can get $1 insurance for health, dental, and vision if you're on the school board, plus a whole bunch of extra money and a few other things that I think may need to call you about, or not legal. So that's the only lucrative school board I've heard about anecdotally, but it's a thankless job. So even finding people in the past, right, finding people who are
A lot
willing
of
to
people
run
are
for
rising
school
to that
board.
these days though, which is a good thing, but I mean, probably not enough. But I just had an email today from a friend of mine that's asking for the township where I live, who do you know that would be good for this, because she's running for school board in HSC, which needs it very much.
Yes, very.
But, and I guess another question related to that, and you all, some of you are more political types than others, but you may or may not have an opinion on that, but is it in our interest to correct some of these issues to make, running for school board a partisan position?
I 100%.
Yes.
I
I'm
think
like all
it
in
is.
on it.
Yeah.
I think
And we
it is,
tried
but
to push
obviously.
that language and it was,
Yeah.
they.
I
Can
did
you all
research
speak
for
to that,
Rockland.
why that would be good?
Yeah, there's split decision on that.
I don't know if I don't, you guys talk about why I think it's good.
My thought is
It's
exactly
good,
what
right?
you
It's
said, is
fun.
that part is, I mean, to know who's running, okay, so I look at the ballot, there's 5 names, I have no idea who these people are. You have no sense of how they think about anything, okay, how are you supposed to go find this information? And, they're like, well, you know, schools aren't political, school boards aren't political. Well, they absolutely are, because
They are, whether we like it or not.
90% of all their money to run, it comes from the teachers union, so they absolutely are political, and to act like they're not, you know,
It's head in the sand.
I think I should have a right to know if they're more conservative, or if they're leaning liberal when I'm going in that ballot box.
Devil's advocate,
Okay.
not saying I talk this, but just to be a devil's advocate, just because someone has an R beside their name doesn't actually mean they
You're
share your
right.
values.
No, we
You're
know
right.
that, yeah.
So,
But you got,
We
it's
all know
something,
that.
it's
I think
something.
it's more of a
thing.
tendency
It's
of
better
how
that
they
it goes
go.
towards the advantage of
better.
the Democrats. Look at it like this. If it wasn't to the advantage of the progressive
Agreed.
Democratic Party,
Agreed.
with the teachers' unions as strong as they are, that law would have been put forward a long time ago. The fact that it comes up and people fight for it and the teachers' unions slam it down, they know, just as we all know, that by hiding their D, they are increasing
It
the
helps them.
chances of people picking their name, because nobody, it's like judges, unfortunately. 2 really important things that people know very little about the people on the ballot. So I think D or R, I know it's not always accurate, but it's better than
Well,
that.
I will say this too. I mean, I'm someone who's in the know. I've been around politics for a really long time, decades. And it's even hard for me to find information about my school board.
Yeah, it is
You know,
hard to
so,
find. I try
yeah,
to look as well. It's hard to get
I
information.
mean, people are asking me, Allison, who, I can't even find a basic interview on them. And when they do have an interview, it is such a puff piece. You can't tell squat about what that person
Which to
actually
me
thinks.
would be a reason why it might be good for them to have a letter by their name.
I think you
You know,
could,
tell them
and I think there was
something
some,
about their
there
alignments.
has been a lot of discussion last session,
Yeah.
2 sessions ago around it, and
Last one.
and it'll come back, cause I'm hearing more about school boards and problems with school boards than I have in a long time, but I think an RRD could be a good indicator, generic indicator of kind of some general stuff. I don't wanna see us go to, we have to have a balanced partisan school board, right? Where it has to, if it's a 5-member school board, no more than 3 of one political
No,
party, right?
yeah.
Because that also may not be representative of the area.
Well,
Right.
Johnson County, I don't think we have any Democrat office holders at all.
Right.
So to have a split would be not representative of our county.
And there are places that'll be just the exact opposite, right?
Exactly.
And so,
Absolutely.
so as an indicator, yes, but to say, you know, then you can only pick, you know, 3 of this or 2 of this, or it's, you know, the top 5 vote getters, as long as they're of different, you know, no more than 3 of one party. That's where I think it's a potential bridge too far.
I think a lot of the pushback in the legislature comes from legislators who live in areas where there is no school choice. All they have is a teacher union. So if they're, I mean, did you guys agree with that? I mean, that there's just enough of them where there's no school choice here, so I'm gonna do whatever my public schools want, you know, without taking into account the rest of the state. That's kind of what I.
And maybe that's going away because of like the shroud coming off or the veil being pulled. And those people, especially in the rural communities, we hear a lot of complaints. I mean, come and hang out at the outreach or whoever takes on the constituency, complaints at the Office of the Attorney General. We get them all day long. And you think some things are not happening in the rural areas, that they're safer, cleaner, more conservative?
No.
It's heartbreaking, actually, to hear some of the complaints that we get.
We have time for one last question. I saw our host
I had
Ron raise his
thank you.
hand.
I'll try to go fast. So I had the opportunity when Governor Danielson's first term to, I guess, maybe draw the short straw to start Indiana's first virtual charter school. Took me 5 tries. I started 5 schools. We got them all through, but in the process, I accumulated about 1.5 inch thick FBI file of death threats from teachers union representatives.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not making that up. One of them, by the way, was Dan Clark. Not a death threat, but a slanderous article in the Star. My question for you is this: how can we leave today knowing this upcoming legislative session, we're going to go in and tinker around the edges and honestly believe that future Hoosiers will thrive? That is malpractice as an adult. Future Hoosiers won't thrive if we just keep thinking that what we have, if we just make it a little better, add another report, and add some more money. Thank you, Westfield, you're gonna get more money. It's not gonna change. Until we
You're right.
say, no, it's time to totally reboot the system. If a business put out a product that only 39% of it would work,
3%.
there's no hope in the world for them to survive, and it's not okay as adults to think that future Hoosiers are gonna thrive. So I ask all of us in this room, if not you, who, to take a stand, and if not now, when?
So one of
If
the
we just
things,
keep saying it's okay, in 10 years, we're gonna be sitting, not in this room, but in 10 years, we're gonna be standing around going, well, if we just add this little program and this.
well, but
it's
why
not
are all
gonna
these
change.
programs being suggested? I mean, I also sit on the Education Outcomes Task Force for the Commission on Improving the Status of Children in Indiana. We deal with the girls you're working with. That's who we talk about 90% of the time. And honestly, the thing that everybody keeps talking around what's really happening, and what's really happening is the breakdown of the family. Why are we asking for all these programs? Because the families aren't able to provide what they used to be able to provide.
Can't
They're no
legislate
longer
a family.
stable, there's no longer, I mean, that's part of the issue.
It's cultural, it's cultural.
It is cultural.
The more the school
And-
does,
and
the more the
legislation.
government does, the less able a family is to do what they need to do. The more you take that over for families, it removes them from their responsibility to do so. If you always
That's right.
clean your kid's room for them, they're not gonna clean their room, right? I mean, I know that seems extreme, and I'm not suggesting to pull resources from the really needy children, but I think when you take over every responsibility for a parent through the school, you know, they do tend to sort of
That's exactly right.
think it's like dispersion of responsibility.
I'm adamantly interested in future Hoosiers thriving. My family's here, my businesses are here,
I agree.
my friends are here, and I'm not willing to say, now just tinker around the edges one more year. We'll kick it down the can, we'll kick it down the road one more year, and next year we'll fix it. We do have supermajority, just say, full stop.
Go down there, we need you.
Let's go down there.
Stay down there, bring all your
Put a
friends,
put a pipe in
and
the
bat that
spokes and say
teachers
full
union when the
stop.
sea of red comes in.
We do, but just like we said on school board, an R and a D might give you an indicator, it is not an absolute.
No.
Yeah.
And on education, that's true too.
Yeah.
We may have super majorities, but it isn't easy to get big,
It's almost tougher
Ideas
sometimes
pass
because there are so many.
even with,
Everywhere.
yeah, yeah.
And I will say one thing, just about the virtual stuff, I think that for some students, I think that's a really good idea, and I think there's really no other option for others, but I think when kids come to the school, they need to have less computer time. I mean, when you look and they're all just sitting on computers in little patches all day long, and they're, 10, 11, 12, and then we wonder why they're so screwed up. I mean, you put that together with the pandemic, and they're completely isolated, and even at school, I mean, that's one beauty of public school, is that it's sort of the common heart of a community, right? And they have this common body of knowledge that they kind of learn as they go along the way, and it's a sense of community and a sense of belonging. We don't wanna throw all of that out either. We wanna do it smartly. And I get your point, I mean, my kids have been in private school, I mean, I'm a school choice person, but I think that you're always going to have a public school. There's just not enough, where are you gonna put all the kids?
I don't disagree with
You know.
that, I just think that we can't let the sun rise one more time without completely unplugging the entire system.
Yeah,
Tell Washington, keep your cash, we got enough here, we don't need your help, and let's start from scratch.
that's exactly right, I mean, it's
There's
like
nobody-
9% of our budget.
There's no
so-
entrepreneur, no business person, nobody that thinks logically, reasonably, that has to sign in front of a paycheck, that would spend the kind of money we're spending in the state for these absurd results that we're getting.
Or how about this, how about the fact that the federal government is like 9% of a revenue for education? I mean, what businessman is gonna let somebody with a 9% control
Goodbye.
dictate everything, 100% of what's going on in the
Goodbye.
classroom?
Goodbye, we don't want your
Goodbye.
help.
Yeah,
We
you
don't want
cost
your
more than you provide.
Well, please join me in thanking
Any
our panelists.
panelists?